What is up, Zoneheads family? Welcome into the Zoneheads podcast. I'm Brandon. He's Zach, and you can always join us live on Facebook or on Twitter. If not, you can always view these episodes on YouTube. Just search my name, Zach's name, Zoneheads Media, the Zoneheads podcast, all of that will get you where you need to go. And of course, wherever you download your favorites throughout the course of the week. We took last week off due to the All-Star break, some much-needed R&R, spent some time at Caribe Royale with the family, and jotted over to Disney as well, which was just about a mile and a half down the road, which was great. It's the first time that we've stayed close, but not on the actual Disney campus. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that, Zach. I know you're a Disney freak as well. But I liked it. I liked being close, but not in it, because it kind of allowed you to exit the bubble. And we know how busy the bubble.
Oh, the bubble. I haven't heard you talk about a bubble in Orlando, Disney style, since the old vid started back in 2020. Right. That was quite the time as a sports fan, as a person, but as a sports fan. Yeah, I mean, we'll do a separate episode on my Disney tips and tricks, but I can tell you it's definitely such a different experience staying, on resort property, just off of it, and just staying a little further away. There are three different, very big adventures when you do that, but they all have their pros and cons for sure. Whether it's price or proximity, but yeah, it's a ton of fun either way, man. Yeah, I'm a big fan, so.
Yeah, the closer you get to that castle, the more you're spending. But the way I like to justify it is the less I spend on the stay, the more I can spend on the kid, and so it all ends up shaking out in the wash. But since we're talking about spending money, let's go ahead and pay some bills. Looking to buy, sell, or invest in a home in Central Florida, you need a realtor who not only knows the market but has experience in protecting your investment. Meet Kevin Crager with LPT Realty, one of the top 25 producing agents in Central Florida. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. Call him at 407-702-4635, and I'll have that number popped up on the screen here in a moment as well if you want to go ahead and jot that down. I like how it's Monday, and I can already feel I had tea right before we hopped on the podcast. It feels like my voice wants to fail me, and it's a little early in the week for that to happen, so I'm not thrilled about this development. Zach, I saw online before we get into the meat of today's episode, we are checking the Disney box. Talk to me about this rebrand. What's going on at Casa de Zach?
Yeah, man. I've done a lot of freelancing this year for a bunch of different companies, from nonprofits to cigar shops to friends and family, small businesses. And a lot of what I'm doing is specific to social media marketing, and whether I'm being the influencer for a company or a brand, or helping others just kind of put theirs on the forefront. That's something I've really invested a lot of time into. And honestly, it wasn't something I was expecting to put a lot of time into on my own side. I actually wanted to take a step away from social media and digital, but everybody started calling, and that kind of just seemed to be a natural path for me post iHeart career. So outside of obviously what we're doing here, I am helping a lot of different folks, again, whether that's personal or small business, get their social media game right. And it's not something I feel like I'm a genius at by any means, but then when you start talking to folks that aren't as equipped in the digital landscape or in social media, you realize you have a lot of skills that you can share. So the rebrand on Instagram and across the board really at Zach on the Mic was, transitioning from almost like a post-mortem for my iHeart days into, all right, guys, like, I'm still alive, y'all. I'm still here. And obviously we're going to have a ton of content for Zoneheads. And obviously I'm going to lean into what we're doing, you and I, from not just Orlando, but everywhere, thanks to the power of media and social media. But beyond that, I want to make sure that folks, and I'll continue to update and add some things, especially today and this week, but I want to continue to put myself out there to help folks, because I just realized how many need it. Now, obviously, I'm not doing it pro bono, but it's a lot more
as
affordable.
You shouldn't, by the way.
But, I'm not going to throw prices out and stuff. I've kind of worked individually on the people and companies in terms of what I'm charging. But you get out there and, like, there's, man, nationally, the amount that digital marketing agencies are charging folks for, like, the simplest social media stuff. It's insane, y'all.
Robbery. So, I've seen some of that stuff out there, so I'm glad that you're doing it. And I think, the self-awareness to say, you know, not a genius at it. You and I, we've kind of been doing this for an equal amount of time, and I don't know that we've been trained perfectly on how to do social media the best.
Oh, we trained ourselves mostly.
Exactly.
So
and I think it's trial by fire, it's trial and
Yep.
error. And I
Yep.
think it's really a volume play. We have had to create so much content and then push that content out there in a variety of different ways over the years that other people that are in industries that aren't based on promoting yourself or your brand, they just haven't put the volume together. So I can certainly attest to the mindset that you have. And then for anybody that's watching this and wondering if Zach is somebody you should partner with, just know you're in good hands.
Yeah, just DM me, reach out. Like I said, I mean, I think the beauty of this business so far, and I do want to get into some baseball because spring training's here, baby. But the beauty of like what I'm doing, and again, it's freelancing, so I'm not putting a ton of pressure on it in terms of like a crazy amount. But the beauty of what I'm doing is it's uber specific to whoever reaches out to me. Like, so I'm not trying to hustle you. I'm not even really out there like begging for business. Like, I'm just saying I'm open, and if you're looking for it, holler at me. And it's just been kind of wild how many folks have done that already without me even really putting any effort in. So yeah, I'm here not just to do that, but to talk sports with y'all too. And that's what me and BK do every time on the Zone Heads podcast.
Indeed. And we're going to do that right now. We're also going to try something different today, something wild and crazy. We're going to end today's episode with our Zone Heads bets. Zach and I dabble quite a bit in the betting space, whether that be over at Hard Rock or on Better Edge. And, well, we want to share all of those thoughts with you, however profitable or costly they may be. So we'll wrap today's episode and the rest of our episodes moving forward with the bets that we're on, whether that be for tonight, this week, or a futures play. We want to talk some baseball. Spring training has begun. The season starts up in a month. The Yankees can quit shaving. But most importantly, I want to start with what's going on in your neck of the woods. What is up with the Tampa Bay Rays, the future in that market? I know that is about as loaded a question as can be. I tried to do some updated reading on this. I've been following the story, but just to make sure that I'm as present of mind when having this conversation with you. And I watched some news clips from over in your neck of the woods as well. I think I'm just as confused about this as I was prior to doing the research. So either I'm not doing it right or the story is just that puzzling. But where are we as far as this goes? And ultimately what I want to get to is who's the villain and how likely is it that this team is no longer going to be in the Tampa area moving forward?
So I want to preface this with I used to cover this every day. I was as involved and as close to the fire as anybody that's ever covered this stadium situation. And it still baffled me over and over and over again. And every time you thought you had it figured out, there were some twists and turns that came up. So I'm not covering it as heavily now, obviously, with the way things are kind of shaken out. That being said, it is really confusing, but I still go back to the core beliefs, even with all the updated news. And you have St. Pete in this stadium plan that's out there. And essentially, there's a date at the end of March. I actually think it's the 31st, the end of the last day of the month, next month, that if the Rays don't, meet certain requirements from a money standpoint that they agreed to, that the deal in St. Pete kind of falls apart. And then at that point, I do think, and you're hearing a lot of folks say this around Tampa Bay that covered the team and that just are close to baseball in general, that we're kind of heading towards Stu Sternberg finally selling the team potentially. Now, there's rumors, and I've said this on multiple podcasts, multiple shows throughout the last few years, that there's this like hidden mystery group in Tampa that people whisper about that's willing to potentially buy the Rays. But Stu has never pulled the trigger, and it's never become a public enough known thing. And I don't even know who they are, I'll be honest with you, but I've known that they're like this mystery X group that's existed for a while. Now, I do think that everything was in place and that stadium would have been built and it would have been a smooth situation had the Hurricanes not hit late last year in Florida and in Tampa Bay specifically that ripped up the trop and the roof off of it. That happened though, and it just kind of put us back into a situation of chaos. And
can I pause right there? Because I think that's probably the most important part of all of this is why it fell apart. And it was that. I remember it was like 6 months ago, prior to the Hurricanes hitting, there was that big release that, hey, the Rays aren't leaving St. Pete. Then the Hurricanes hit, the roof gets blown off the trop. And more importantly, other areas in that St. Pete town where a lot of the money over the course of the year is made because of beach tourism. And so you have to repair that stuff first.
Yep.
I think that is the right mindset from the city. But it seemed like in my mind, they went back to the Rays and said, the deal that we had, we can no longer do because of the destruction in the area. So we need to take a step back. Am I understanding that right? That was the way that this went down. So it was St. Pete going to the Rays and going, the deal we had in place before isn't going to work now based on logistics.
Not that it wasn't going to work, but just, hey, we needed to take a second and make sure like we're going to be all right and that this money and all this situation is still good for us. It wasn't that they said it wasn't going to work. St. Pete was just like, can we get a week to like think about this now? Like we just got crushed by these hurricanes.
And Stu Sternberg stepped in and said, no, not really.
He sent a letter, and that's public. That's out there. That was just like, you guys broke the deal, and like it started to get real messy real quick again. Basically, is what it boils down to. Whoever you want to point the finger at, it's always easiest to point the finger at the owner in any of these situations and say they're a billionaire. They need to figure it out.
Well, I mean, based on the way that you're telling this story, the way that I understand it right now, he would be the bad guy.
I mean, look, again, it's tough. It's nuanced. Stu Sternberg took over this squad, and they've only been to a couple World Series since, done a ton. Like this franchise is immaculately better than where it was before he took over. Now, that's not to say that they can't get even better and start to spend more money. Like, don't get me wrong. But I don't think he gets enough credit for what this franchise has done as he's owned it. That being said, he also has to own some of the mistakes and missteps that he's taken, whether it's the Montreal split city plan that, never had a real chance and that MLB kind of strung him along on before pulling the plug. There's a lot of things like that we can look back on. And I think this is another instance, like post-Hurricanes, I don't think the Rays and Stu necessarily handled things to the best of their abilities. I think it got messy and they just kind of started clutching the money again, which is kind of what led to the long drought we've had of this issue in the first place, or not drought, but just, the opposite of that. It's heavy rain of problems. But where we're at now, just to kind of forward it a little bit, Brandon. So the three things, I think the most likely thing in general is that this team still stays in Tampa Bay in some capacity. It is interesting that they're going to be playing in Tampa in the Yankees minor league park for this season. And I think that's going to be a separate chat that we can kind of have when we get closer to opening day, what that'll look like and just kind of how that's going to go from a fan perspective. However, I do think it adds another wrinkle of like, what about Tampa? Because I think it was pretty much done. Team was going to be in St. Pete, like whatever that looks like, and that's still possible. Like if the Rays step up and everything kind of works out the way it's quote unquote supposed to from a financial standpoint in the short term, then all of this is for nothing. And that's how I felt at the beginning of the year, back in January 1st was, look, we've had a lot of like conversations, we've seen a lot of craziness, but I still think ultimately this deal holds because enough of it's done. The second option is that mystery group or somebody steps in and keeps them in Tampa. The third option, and this isn't one that I believe is realistic, and I know in Orlando some of y'all think it might end up, where the Rays move across I-4.
We're dreaming.
Whether it's that or Nashville or Charlotte or anywhere else, Las Vegas is getting the A's at some point, allegedly. That's a separate chat too. But I don't think that that's realistic because we know some things for sure. We know that Rob Manfred, the MLB commissioner, and that the MLB in general does not want baseball out of Tampa Bay. They're going to do everything they can to keep this team, and they have. If think about how crazy and messy it's been, Brandon. Think about the insanity behind this thing. You just said it yourself. It's been hard to follow because it's so messy and all that. Like if the MLB was going to force this team out and just to sell or something, they would have already done it. They would have already done that. So, and Manfred's been on the record more times than I can count saying he wants to keep the Rays in Tampa Bay.
So to that point, that was part of the research that I did today in preparation of this discussion. I did not realize that this was the case, that Rob Manfred has actually spent time in the Bay Area within the last year trying to get the votes to make sure that they didn't leave. Having Major League Baseball with that sort of concerted
effort. I've told you that in the last 12 months, but every time I do, you're like, oh, Orlando's got a chance. You put the
there's Rob Manfred has his hand in a lot of pots, okay? Because what
Fair.
Barry Larkin, who's now on the Orlando Dreamers committee,
Uh-huh.
told me was that he's had conversations about conversations with Rob Manfred, and Manfred is aware of their efforts, and the key effort from the Dreamers is not to get an expansion team; it's to swipe the Rays. Now,
Okay,
there's
but
no.
what does it mean if you're aware of efforts? I'm aware of a lot of things. That's
Well,
not tangible.
I honestly figured that I figured Rob Manfred had no idea that Orlando was even interested. So
I don't
that
think
was it. That
that's
was at least news to me
no. I mean, look, you
that
guys
is the
are
case.
like Orlando's a legitimate market, right? Like, there's a lot to love about Orlando. You know, I've got nothing but good things to say. I wish we could get to each other quicker than using I-4. I hate that. I hate that. But I love Orlando. I just think that again, I've been in a lot of rooms. I've had a lot of chats, like close to the fire. Like, it's never been a legitimate option. It's never even been like a 1% option. So I think Manfred and MLB is aware. I'm surprised there isn't more of a push to get some type of baseball more consistently in Orlando, even if that's like a game or a series every year or whatever that looks like. But that being said, moving the Rays to Orlando doesn't necessarily solve any problems. It just shifts them down the I-4 corridor.
Um, yeah, well, if you're able to build a stadium, then it solves that problem. But you
Oh
got to
yeah,
have financial backing first.
yeah.
And
Come
what that, I
on,
mean, look, at
man.
the end of the day, I understand completely. I have never had my head in the clouds with this Orlando baseball thing. I think it would work. I've said that a million times. But do I think it's realistic? No. Did it become 2% more realistic with Barry Larkin behind it rather than Pat Williams, who, God rest his soul, was past his prime when he came up with this effort? Yeah, I think it helps a little bit more because if Rob Manfred is picking up the phone and he has any say in this, he's going to pick up the phone for Barry Larkin more so than some random Joe that's calling about the Orlando Dreamers. So in that sense, it just became more real, more than anything else, Zach. This is a fun radio topic for Orlando. It's, I'm not going to call it filler because I think it's people are into it. Like if
it's
every time
it
we brought it up, nobody was interested, I would just stop talking about it. Every
for
time
sure.
the idea of baseball to Orlando is brought up, it's one of the more reacted to topics that we can even launch over here on this side. So I think there's interest, but more than anything else, everybody's got an opinion on this, and it makes for great
Yeah.
radio. That doesn't mean that I actually think baseball is coming to this city.
Yeah, and what I would say to that is, like, again, I'm in Tampa Bay. Even when it looked like it was 100% staying in St. Pete and figured out, you still had folks being like, what if they did this in Tampa? And it's like, the deal's done. Like, you guys can stop coming up with these scenarios. So I think just as baseball fans, like, it not to kind of play off the Orlando name, but like, it's fun to dream. It's fun to think about different things. Like, like it I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you also are realistic about like what's happening or what probably will happen. I think it's kind of nice to have both of those things going. And again, like, listen, I've met you. We've watched a Rays game in Orlando at
It was
Disney.
cool.
So I personally, and I've said this, there is so much, and we would need another hour to go through all the things baseball could do to kind of get going. Like, give me a series that like is somewhere like that's not a home game or home series for someone. And I look at a team like the Rays or like Oakland, it's kind of in between, anyways. Like, send them to Orlando for a week, right? Like, I don't think you can do that with every team all year throughout the year, but have like a special series that you do. They send them to London now, right? We've had the Field of Dreams series. Like, there's no reason we can't do more of that. And if that's the case, I think it'd be insane not to include Orlando in the rotation of fun. You know what I'm saying? So like,
I'm
that's where
completely
I'm at.
with you on that. But so I have and I could talk about that for an hour. Why does it seem like, and not that this is never talked about, but it's not talked about enough, just moving the Rays to Tampa? And I mean that from the ownership. Why is it not more of an effort from Stu Sternberg to go, we need to cross the bridge?
Yeah, for sure. I can tell you, and they've actually said this again publicly, the Rays would prefer to be in Tampa. They've said that. They've tried to figure it out. At no point in the last 20 years, or however long Stu's been in charge now and owned this team, has Tampa stepped up in a way where they're able to put even $200 million on the table to help it happen. So there's always been more willingness on the St. Pete side from a city perspective up front to put more money to make the stadium deal happen. I do think that part of that trepidation is because Stu, up until this recent situation with St. Pete, also never put up that much money officially. He just said things and talked about it. I think you go back to the Ebor plan that the Rays were trying to come up with, and Stu kicks himself. I know for a fact that like he didn't put up half and just say, let's get this done, because now it's going to be way more expensive and it's only gotten messier. But to put it blank, the Tampa side has never come up with the funds on the front end. They've always said it'll be better long term. The money will make sense long term. But when you're, paying over $1 billion to build a stadium, who cares about 10 years from now? Like it's over $1 billion. Like we got to get this bad boy built. If we don't have the money to do that, 10 years from now doesn't matter. So that's always been the issue on the Tampa side, is that the city, and I've talked to the mayor on air before. We've talked to different constituents. Like there's always been like, yeah, that'd be cool if they came. We think it'd work here, but never a real push financially to even meet the Rays halfway, to even meet them a quarter of the way, to be honest, if you're doing the percentages. So Tampa's just never legitimately stepped up. They just say like, oh, we should have the Rays. It should be here, but they're not willing to step up and pay for it.
It's bizarre to me that these owners that are already billionaires, you can't own a major league team in today's world unless you're there, that they don't just pony up and pay for it themselves. I know it's easier, and I'm sure it's way more profitable to have the taxpayers do it. But one, you get to pocket all the cash. You don't have to share it with the city. And when you sell the team, you're making billions on top of billions off of that. It blows my mind that this is, I mean, it's all greed, but that this is still this big of an issue when it's not like owning a pro sports franchise is a losing effort financially. You are going to make money hand over fist on that investment when you decide to sell the team. So paying for a stadium shouldn't be as big of a deal for these billionaires as it seems to be. Yet we always end up in these sort of contentious fights, and this stadium deal seems to be one of the worst that's out there.
Yeah, I just think, to be blunt, like that's bad business if you're an owner, though. And they're not bad businessmen or they wouldn't own these teams.
I get it.
So,
I'm thinking like someone that doesn't have $1 billion. I totally understand that.
Which is what 99% of us do, because we don't have that money. But I think you have to put yourself in their shoes. Like if anybody's, and I'm not coming at you, Brandon. I'm just saying I've heard this so many times in my life. And trust me, I get it. As a non-billionaire, I'm like, F you, pay the money. But on the same page, I'm realistic. Like there's infrastructure, there's plans, there are cities that help pay. And now in general, we're in a different country, in a different sports world than we've ever been. Like cities and areas don't pony up like they used to, whether you're talking about, California, Florida, somewhere in the middle. That's why the Vegas situation's been messy for the A's. You thought that was a home run. It's not going the way they thought it would in terms of transition. It's just a lot harder to get these things done. So it'll be.
It makes me applaud. I applaud St. Pete for saying, "Yeah, we want the Rays. You guys don't make or break this town."
Yeah, for sure.
And I think Vegas can say that to anybody.
Vegas for sure, but even St. Pete has said, like, if you look at it a lot of ways, financially speaking, they can do more for the city and they can spend less by not keeping the Rays there. Now, obviously, you also have to live with losing baseball, but there's beaches, there's a lot of other things going on.
People are still going to St. Pete.
They're going to be okay. You can make, I mean, I didn't even make the argument. Right now, people go to St. Pete and it's not for the Rays, right? So, I mean, I love the Rays. Like, you're not going to find a more diehard fan, but like, I'm also uber realistic about their situation across the board. Listen, this is all really sad. We got to talk about something good though. The automated strike zone. We got robot refs.
You're so excited about this.
As long as you've known me, as long as I've been able to breathe into this world, I have wanted robot umps. And we're seeing it in spring. And like, man, I got to be honest with you. I know this, I hope there was no kids watching. I got to take some cold showers after some of these robot situations I'm seeing. Because I'm like, we've been waiting, bro. And the arguments against and the amount of time it's taken for Major League Baseball to start to try to implement this on the pro level. Like, it's just, you're seeing these calls and there's like a gap in the strike zone. Strike three, you're out, bases loaded. Guys like, nope, we're challenging that. And then they show it on the big screen. They're like, you dumbass, you missed the call. He's staying at the plate. Oh, it's beautiful. And I know there's people who will pound, the ground on the podium for umpires and be like, you should try it for a day. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying if we have technology to make it better, it was insane not to use it. And we finally are. It's the best thing about heading into the 2025 baseball season, Brandon. Even if they don't use it in the regular season, we're so much closer than we've ever been.
All right, keep your pants on, Zach. All right. I
It's so beautiful. It's the double rainbows of my life, Brandon.
I haven't watched this play out live yet.
Oh,
Full
so good.
disclosure, I have
Do it.
seen this. I have seen this at the minor league level. I saw the first clip that popped up the first day, the first at bat where it took place. I have issues with it.
Ah.
I always think that more review in sports is a negative. We are allowing it to seep in too much to the sports
It's
world.
instant. It's basically
Now
instant. Basically.
I mean, I got you. I'm not totally off on it. Originally, I hated this, but it is very quick, very expeditious.
Mm-hmm.
I can appreciate that. The one thing I wish that I saw, and this is where I think the NFL gets it right more than any other sport. I need a more demonstrative display of I am challenging this call. This shouldn't be something that you should be up in section 250 with a hot dog in your face, with no doubt in your mind that there is a challenge on the play. Someone tapping their head and then an umpire turning around is not demonstrative. And it's
What
the same
about
thing in the NBA is the same problem because they just do this. They wag their finger and then there's a challenge. And if you look down for 1 second, you have no idea. The NFL has a nice big bright red flag and the coaches slam it like the Rob Gronkowski. And even if you miss that, there's a big red flag on the field. We just need a more demonstrative display because look, during the baseball game, how often between pitches you pull out the phone, you swipe through Instagram, and then all of a sudden you look up, you're like, what did I miss? I need something that displays we're doing this, make it a show. It needs to be for the audience and not to just add another 17 seconds to a game.
I got it, bro. They're just gonna put like a dummy towards the backstop, and you have to go up to it and smack it with your bat if you want a challenge. You gotta whack the dummy if you want the challenge. That's what we want.
All right, I dig that. All right, hey, as I promised, I'm glad that you got that off your chest. As I promised, we're wrapping today's episode with our Zone Heads bets. Yeah, we've layered in production now. This podcast is at the next level.
We got to get the digital interns paid more, man. They're doing it.
Well, I might have to hire Zach Blobner and co. I want this to look good. I made that.
You're the co.
I made that. I made that right before I fell asleep in the dark the other day. So hopefully y'all love that as much as I do. Hey, since we're talking baseball, let's go ahead and lay out a baseball bet. I do have some NBA stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. Real quick, as far as what I bet tonight, I like OKC minus 12.5. I also like the under at 227. They're taking on the Minnesota Timberwolves for the second night in a row, and I think they're taking them to Smack City. Now, for the baseball world, there was a division bet that I had my eye on. I really don't like laying futures in baseball at the start of the season. Mm-hmm. I would personally usually wait until the end of the year, like midway through the season when I don't want my money to just sit there for 162 games. So I try and create a shorter shelf life. That's really what it's about. And the value is it really even that great? If you're putting money out there right now, the Dodgers to win the World Series feels like the most obvious bet in the world. They're plus 240. You probably get a payout on that, but is that enough to really tie up your money for the entirety of the baseball season? The Boston Red Sox at plus 440 to win the AL East. I love what they have done to this lineup. I think they're going to be just as good regular season wise as my Baltimore Orioles and the New York Yankees. I think it's going to be a 3-team race all season long, and I would take the team with the longest odds. So that's one that I like right now. If I had to place a futures bet on baseball that has a little bit more of a payout than the Dodgers, I would take the Red Sox to win the AL East.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I thought Boston showed last year that they were legitimate. I thought they were going to be awful, and then I thought it was a flash in the pan, and then it sustained. And the players, the younger guys they got, some leadership there still with Devers. And then
they got Bregman, they added Crochet, they added some really significant pieces.
I don't hate that. And the AL East tends to be a little bit harder to kind of figure out too. With the squads, and now Baltimore is able to spend to do some stuff as well. To that point, I would tell you on that, looking at some of these future bets, if you do want to go with the 2025 season, I always bet the Rays over because they hit like 90% of the time the last, 8 to 9 years. I know last year they didn't, but they're 81.5 wins. I could see them getting to 82, 83, 84, 85. Like, I don't think that they'll comfortably blow past 81, but I think that like that would be a decent bet to take. Um, you mentioned the Dodgers, like you should be betting the Dodgers. 103.5 games, that feels low. Like I'm
Yeah.
taking the out of 162, like they're getting into the 110s, maybe even 120s. Like the Dodgers are going to win a lot of games. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. Everyone's going to root against them. They're the villain now. God, I hate what they've ruined my excitement for baseball. Thank God the robot umps came in to help get me juiced up again.
It
But
does feel like it's them and everybody else, but
I do like to hit.
it's still baseball. It's still so hard. It's still hard to win the
But
World Series and put it
oh
together from
yeah,
beginning to end.
but that's why I said I would go with them regular season over 103.5. And then the last one, just for kicks, the White Sox are at 53.5. I know how bad they were last year. I made a lot of money on how bad they were last year, except for when they played the Rays and somehow beat the crap out of them in that. But that's a different chat. The White Sox at 53.5, like they have to win more than 53 games this year, right? Like there's no way they go back-to-back years just being like that atrocious.
So last year, just for a frame of reference here, they won 41 games.
I know.
That's a tough ask.
I wouldn't bet that, but like I don't know, man. That's crazy. But
And
I
their
like
best
the
and their
the
best
Rays
players
over.
gone.
53 is like nothing. Then again, I can't pick the 53 games they'd win. So
Well, here's what you should do then. Don't bet that. Just don't do that. Instead, if you think the White Sox are going to win, just try and pick your spots and take their money line and see if you can get, because they're going to be massive underdogs every single night, and they're going to be games where you can get them like 3-1 to win. You're better off just doing that. Don't do it, Zach. Don't do it. I care about your funds. That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Zone Heads podcast, presented by Kevin Crager with LPT Realty. When it comes to real estate, experience matters. Trust Kevin Crager to guide you every step of the way. You can call him, the number listed on the screen, 407-702-4635. And shoot a DM to my man, Zach. He started up his own business. He's helping people with their social media needs. You can check out this podcast wherever you download them and head on over to zoneheadsmedia.com for much of the same. We got you covered. We're back next week with another edition of the Zone Heads podcast. Peace.